Hello. David Humphreys wrote, prior to the 2005 Stand Your Ground Law Amendment, the mean monthly homicide by fire rate in Florida was 0.29 deaths per 100,000. These results estimate that after the amendment took effect, there was an abrupt and sustained increase in monthly homicide rates of 31.6%. Looking at the Stand Your Ground law in Florida and accounting for the recent changes that don't require a person to attempt to retreat before using deadly force, Florida is open an environment that any gun owner can shoot first and ask questions later. Changing the Stand Your Ground law in Florida to have more extensive restrictions will reduce the likelihood of a person killing someone over something small. To begin with, we'll look at the numbers of homicides prior to the Stand Your Ground law amendment. Then we'll look at the number after, and then we'll discuss, a couple things I believe that we can do to make the law better. Just after the turn of the century, Florida changed the section of its self-defense law that is commonly known as Stand Your Ground law. The Educational Fund Against Gun Violence states before 2005, laws in nearly every state require that an individual outside of the home, which is key because inside the home is considered the castle doctrine, but it required them to have the duty to retreat before resulting in the use of deadly force. Only if an individual were unable to flee from a dangerous situation and faced with imminent death or great bodily harm could they justify the use of deadly force. This legal doctrine is known as the duty to retreat doctrine. The duty to retreat doctrine requires a person to flee back away from a threatening situation when they can do so safely, rather than attempt self-defense by deadly force. This doctrine made a person think before pulling the trigger and killing somebody. David Humphrey writes, prior to 2005, the rate of homicide by firearm was 49.06 deaths per month. Now, although the previous version of the Stand Your Ground law wasn't perfect, it held people accountable for their actions when using deadly force. Now, fast forward to 2005, the state of Florida amended the Stand Your Ground law to provide legal immunity to individuals using deadly force as self-defense. David Humphrey writes, the removal of the duty to retreat doctrine from the Stand Your Ground law, individuals no longer need to explain why they didn't walk away from a threat before things resorted to the use of deadly force. Editor-in-Chief Natalia Rogoli wrote in her article, the Stand Your Ground law in Florida provides immunity from civil action and criminal prosecution when the defense is valid. Some statutes do not offer this benefit. Florida also shifts the burden to the state to prove the shooter did not act in self-defense and therefore is not entitled to these immunities. David Humphreys writes, since the amendment to the Stand Your Ground law, the homicide rate by firearm deaths have risen to 64.5 deaths per month. Now, I believe there are a number of ways we can improve the Stand Your Ground law. First, we need to reinstate the duty to retreat doctrine and make a person with the gun more accountable for their actions. I believe this will decrease the number of Stand Your Ground cases that the courts have to see. Now, with the removal of the duty to retreat doctrine, Natalia Rogoli says it removes any deterrent that might be available for firearm-related homicides because it offers a path to escape without penalty. Now, the duty to retreat, somebody might say, well, I don't have to leave. You approach me, you got violent, I can just shoot you. But just because you own a gun don't make you a big person. No, sometimes the bigger person has to walk the heck away. Next, I would rewrite Section 2 of the legislation, because it currently reads, a person is presumed to have held a reasonable fear of imminent peril or death or great bodily harm to himself or herself or another, using or threatening to use defensive force that is intended or likely to cause death or great bodily harm to another. I would change it to read less of assumptions and more definite thoughts. Because right now, you can operate in a very gray area. And coming up, Florida is about to implement the permitless concealed carry law. So that eliminates the requirement of an individual to have a background check, take a class to conceal the weapon when they're walking around. Per Alan Gaseman. So, in conclusion, with countless cases happening in the past, i.e. Trayvon Martin, of a person getting shot over someone being overzealous and then trying to claim self-defense. Changing this stand your ground law in Florida to have more extensive restrictions will reduce the likelihood of a person killing someone over something small. We looked at the rates of deadly shootings in Florida prior to 2005. Then we looked at the rates of shootings after the 2005 Stand Your Ground Law Amendment. And then I discussed a few things I believe that'll make the law better. And we looked at the people that think it's good just the way it is. So next time you think of the current Florida Stand Your Ground Law, think of this quote by David Schultz. These laws give anyone with a gun more permissive rules of engagement in America's communities than they give our troops in a war zone. Thank you.